Welcome back. This one's all about Brené Brown, The Call to Courage, shown on Netflix, a Netflix special. Vulnerability is the most accurate way to measure courage. The amount of quotables in this Netflix special was just astounding. It was brilliant. It was moving, very different to the TED talk that she became so well known for. So I'm going to get into a very, in some ways I would say, sort of very punctuated review of it with lots of quotables and bits to expand on. Actually, there's quite a few bits. I hope it's not going to be a spoiler. So if you really want to watch it first, then please go for it. It's about an hour and a half long, and definitely worth it. Definitely a very personal talk, if you like, which is quite telling because the funny story is that she actually ditched the script that she had initially for that TED talk. It was a TEDx talk that was in Houston, and then it got because it was so popular, it was then on the TED talk platform. So she ditched the academic script and just made it a very much personal talk on her sort of own experience of vulnerability, and then she obviously brought all her social work into it. But yeah, it was brilliant. So yeah, of course, go ahead and watch it. You can come back and then we can talk about it, or just stay tuned for this. Listen, I have to just very quick tangent though. Very quick tangent. As you guys are here because you tune in to long form content, you want substance, you're here for self and social awareness and what's going on in the world, what's truly going on in the world. You want to know about it, as well as discuss it, talk about it. With life vocabulary content, there is no closure, there is no certainty. It's all about the grey area conversation so we can learn more. We also rely on social media to hear about what is going on in our world. And I was actually just tuning into a conversation that this guy, what's his name? Let me quickly get it for you. Cal Newport was on the Breakfast Club talking about this book of his regarding digital minimalism, which I think was a really useful conversation. And just one highlight that I'll give you is that he's saying no one's telling you to go completely cold turkey. If you do decide to come back off of social media, etc., then you need to reinitiate your reclaim or rediscover leisure time, because you're gonna suddenly get more hours in your day. And so make sure that you've sort of fill that with leisure time where it's all about joy and just being active with no sort of ROI on the end of it. So that was a really good takeaway. He doesn't use social media. He's been a sort of a social scientist for 6 years, and he's been writing about social media. He never got on it, so he's got really unique perspective, and he says, he does have a website, and he'll use 1 or 2 channels on the internet, and because he says it is useful. It's just not great that there was a turning point where we went from having earbuds to suddenly this sort of iPod, which is now regularly getting pulled out of our pockets. So now we have been given we're now, you would just listen to your music and it would just be in your pocket. You would need to sort of always pull it out of your pocket. And it was when I believe it was Facebook who thought, okay, why are we going to rely on someone to log on to the sort of website version of Facebook, like facebook.com, twice a week to not only just post, but then check on how people sort of engaged with it like a week later. we need to make sure that they're checking on it every day. So how can we do that? The thing that they're carrying around all the time. So it's actually not necessarily Apple or the ones who are making the handsets that are the evil, if you like. It's how they ended up changing and switching how this sort of thing called a sort of social media platform functions to have our attention every second and every minute. So it's really interesting. But that's not what I was going to go on a tangent about. Shawn King, if I don't know if you know, but let me quickly get you his bio. He is a journalist from America. He posts a lot of things affecting the Black community which we would not hear about, not just because we're not in the States, but because the mainstream media won't cover it. And he's literally just posted a video of a 15-year-old boy, Luca, a very kind and sweet soul. He's bent down to pick up the cell phone of another boy who was wrongly arrested. The phone fell out during his arrest. He didn't want it to get broken. When he stood up, the officer sprayed his face with pepper spray and then proceeded to brutally assault him. When we say brutally assault, the officer almost broke his arms and banged his head down on the concrete multiple times until he was bleeding. I should have given you a bit of notice, a little warning that there was going to be some sort of graphic description. I'm sorry for that. And it's really heartbreaking to watch something like that, and to know that is occurring somewhere in the world. And there's more. I mean, I'm not naive. I understand that there's all kinds of brutality occurring in the world. It just makes me incredibly angry. Got to do something with it though, with this emotion. There's got to be some way to put it to good use. Okay, so let's talk about Brené Brown, The Call to Courage, Netflix special. So she ditched her academic script when she decided to talk about vulnerability on that sort of famous TEDx talk. She spoke very personally about it, and next thing you know, millions have watched it. I believe it's like 9+ million now over the years. It's funny, after she did the talk, her husband, because she was sort of flipping out afterwards, thinking, oh my god, people are going to see it, I feel so mortified. I think she was just having a cringe moment, and her husband said, for goodness sake, what are people going to do? Google or search Brené Brown vulnerability? Come on now. And that's exactly what people have been doing now for years. But yeah, she talks about courage and vulnerability, and I'm going to go through my notes essentially that I took from watching this 1.5-hour Netflix special. Thanks again for your feedback and for commenting, liking, subscribing and sharing. Welcome back, or welcome to new listeners. So she starts off talking about the fear of shame and criticism, and how she, from her own experience, ended up generating smallness rather than playing big. I thought that was such a brilliant way of putting it, where you are so afraid of criticism and being thought badly of. And, you know, especially when you put yourself in the firing line, you put yourself out in the arena, you're concerned about how people end up viewing you, or how, you know, what they'll say about you, what the feedback will be. And so for that fear of shame and criticism, it's not that she didn't do whatever she was doing in her sort of area of social work. She just did it in a small way. So she generated smallness. So rather than pitching an article straight to an editor, she'd probably go to a sub-editor. She gives a great explanation of that. So rather than playing big, she generated smallness. And just hearing that, I relate to it. I've so many times I have felt that I've done this, where I have not sent that press release to big up my podcast, or I haven't reached out to people that I know who have way more followers than I do on social media and who are more influential, let's say, asking them to sort of share something for me, because I'm afraid, number one, I don't want to piss them off. I don't want them to think that I'm using them. And number two, there is that sort of fear of shame of, oh, you're going to think I'm really shit. So I don't want to put myself in the firing line. Not even firing line. Firing line. It's just, I don't want to put myself out there and just be embarrassed. Or people may just genuinely think it's shit. Or actually, probably more so that the person I'm asking to share it is going to think it's totally crap, and now I'm embarrassed because they can't really be friendly with me, because can they be honest with me and give me feedback? Actually, there's something that Brené Brown talks about, the kind of people that you do need to listen to, because of course we do give a shit about what people say about us. You can't be completely flippant and be like, nah, I don't care. It's just caring about the ones who actually matter. I'll come to that in a second. So yeah, I completely relate with her saying how she generated smallness rather than playing big, and she did encounter a shitstorm, how she described it. She talks about how she ended up having her sort of peanut butter on a big spoon in Downton Abbey binge. By the way, can I watch Downton Abbey? Okay, that's what I'm searching for, The Handmaid's Tale. I need a series to binge. She gives a Roosevelt quote. Now listen, I know there's a bit of a dispute. Is it Roosevelt or Roosevelt? I believe it's Roosevelt. From my American politics studies back in the day, late 90s, I believe. I remember my lecturer saying Roosevelt. Anyway, she explained that the quote, daring greatly, so daring greatly, even if you fail, at least you dared greatly. So Daring Greatly is the name, I believe, of the book, so that's where she got it from Roosevelt. And what she's saying is, rather than generating smallness, you've got to live in the arena. You've got to actually be out there and be brave with your life. You will get your ass kicked, and that's what being vulnerable is all about. But you've got to opt for courage over comfort. Otherwise, what kind of a life is that? Vulnerability is having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. Let's repeat that. Vulnerability is having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. I'm going to sip on my tea. Let's just take that in. Vulnerability is having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. So what is courage for you? So everyone has a different answer. I'd love to hear from you what courage is for you. Just drop it in your comments. I would love to hear what it is for you. What it is for me, is it being vulnerable? I guess I feel vulnerable every day because I feel so stretched. The last year I've sort of feel like I've taken a real thrashing, and it's been a real struggle, especially the last 2 years. I would say the last 2 years more so, but definitely last year. I feel as if I'm forever on the edge. So courage for me is waking up before 6 a.m. every day, even on a day when I don't have to go to work, which is just the weekend. But I've got my cub, and even if I don't have my cub and she's visiting her dad, then I'm still up because that's my body clock. But yeah, so courage for me is waking up before 6 a.m, getting myself in the right state for the next 12 to, how many hours do I end up sort of having the stamina for? 12 to 14, 16 hours. And that involves quick bit of breathing, yoga, checking my phone, and fluids, making my breakfast, making her breakfast, trying to clean up at the same time, making preparing lunch snacks or whatever, getting her up, getting us fed, and having some dialogue with each other and getting ourselves ready as well. Laundry, etc. would have been done the night before rather. Get us out the door on time for school and work, finish work, collect carb, come back, maybe have to pick some stuff up on the way home. I don't have a lunch break. I just keep going sort of throughout the whole day. Come back, grab stuff maybe on the way home to cook again, clean, be with carb, get her ready for bed, get myself sorted-ish. Kind of just dump myself everywhere. Try and clean the kitchen afterwards and prepare for the next day, get her to bed, and then I just want to collapse. But I'm thinking, right, I've been up since before 6 a.m. It's now 7:30 p.m. and I haven't stopped all day. But I've got to keep going. So for me, it's that sort of relentlessness and sort of the courage to then sort of record, plan what I want to do on the podcast, even though I'm so exhausted, and just accepting that I have little time for sort of pleasure and relief, and I just have to make choices that I know are best for me given my circumstances. And so I'll make the most of that of that opportunity that I have, and that is to create content that I feel very sort of create content that I feel very what's the word? I don't know why I can't say it. It's suddenly gone blank. It's really important to me, and I feel as if I'm building something that's not just about me. So yeah, so courage for me is to just almost not even just be relentless, just be sort of diligent and disciplined and just keep going regardless of how I'm feeling, and putting myself out there all the time, whether it's sort of frontline at work or over here on the mic. Actually, this, to be fair, is quite soothing. But that answer is going to be different for everyone. Courage is sort of, for me, again, showing up for my child and being her advocate in every way, and just regardless of, whoever it pisses off, I know I've got to do what's best by her and for me, and it doesn't mean that I'll end up making any friends along the way, but it is the way it is. So yeah, courage for me is finding my voice and making sure my child, gosh, this answer's getting way too long. All right, so I wonder what courage is for you. So Serena, snap out of it. So vulnerability is the most accurate way to measure courage, she says. She says, if you're not in the arena getting your ass kicked on occasion, you can't have an opinion on her work. And that's true. So many people want to have opinions on what we're doing, but if they're not out there in the arena getting their ass kicked on occasion as well, then they can just sit back and be voyeurs. I totally agree with her. It's really interesting, actually. We always talk about this. There's another podcaster that I know called Rainbow Black, and we're talking about how there's people that we know in our circle. I think even Genesis Elijah said this as well. An artist, Genesis Elijah, sorry, that's his name. An artist. He said this as well about how people don't actually support you, but others that you've never met do. And I don't think that's just because it's easier for a fan to support you. I think that people are sort of quietly hating, or they'll hate you and they're not even active themselves in any way. So it's quite cheeky. So you can't take criticism or feedback from people who are not being brave with their lives, is what Brené says. She says, but you have to be specific about the people whose opinion and feedback matters. And these people are ones who love you not in spite of your vulnerability, but because of your vulnerability. They're the ones who'll be honest with you and will support you if you mess up. She said fuck up, but yeah. So I thought that was great. So we can't pretend that we don't care what people think, but you want to make sure you're only really listening to the ones who love you because of your vulnerability, and who will be honest with you, yet they'll still support you if you mess up. I thought that was brilliant. I really did. She gives lots of personal examples. She talks about the kinds of things that we feel criticized over. She talked about feminine norms, the sort of body image being something that we sort of feel shame over, and sort of masculine norms is usually around weakness that they feel shame around. And just talking about how we have to, I guess, allow ourselves to be seen, but you've got to sort of see yourself first. So, so many of us want love and intimacy in our lives. And she asked this question to the audience, and everyone put their hands up. And she said, well, you have to allow yourself to be seen if you want love and intimacy in your life. We can be so afraid to have ourselves seen and to see people, but it's really the only way to love someone is to be vulnerable. And I thought, again, just really excellent reminders, really brilliant reminders. She talked about how currently we have a political and social shit show, a cultural nightmare, and within this sort of cultural nightmare we all want belonging. And she says how belonging is the opposite of fitting in. But you've got to belong to yourself first. So belonging is the opposite of fitting in. You're not going to try to acclimate or be according to what others are telling you to be. In fact, belonging is being you, but you've got to sort of belong to yourself first and sort of embrace yourself first. She says this brilliantly: speaking your truth and not betraying yourself for other people. There's more of these coming. Speaking your truth and not betraying yourself for other people. I'm flicking my forehead right now because I feel like I spent my 20s and 30s consistently betraying myself for other people, although there were probably spaces during those sort of 2 decades where I was sort of reclaiming myself, but probably swiftly got lost and swept up. But yeah, belonging requires you to be who you are, Brené Brown says. There's so much more. She talks about joy being the most vulnerable of human emotions, because the fear of losing it. So she talked about how we can be suddenly. You start to worry when you're sort of feeling happy or joy, because you think, oh, this is going to go. So she says how we dress rehearse tragedy. Again, I totally got that. You can end up having a bit of a catastrophic mindset when it comes to life. And when you're experiencing something good, you're worried that it's going to go. She talked about the ones who are comfortable with that and not sort of rehearsing tragedy are the ones who lean into joy and they practice gratitude. And she talked about people who have lost. So she said, you can be grateful for what you have, but those people who have lost, they're grateful for what they've lost. So you can be grateful for what you have and grateful for what you've lost. And, having that mindset allows you to lean into joy. And the people who she refers to who lost and who are so grateful for, the people that they've lost, they said they miss this very simple and ordinary things. And this is where Brené Brown said, we get so busy chasing the extraordinary moments that we don't enjoy the ordinary moments. We don't just do things for joy. We do it for the return on investment. So, for the outcome, we become very outcome oriented. So, again, brilliant. More penny sort of dropping moments and reminders. When sometimes you're thinking, gosh, this is obvious, but then why did I forget it? I needed to hear it. There's one that I totally tweeted and immediately, and she's talking about her work in with companies and corporations, talking to, I suppose, human resources and management and leadership about people and how vulnerability is important in leadership as well. And she said, brave leaders are never silent around hard things. So she talked about how right now, in this sort of cultural time that we find ourselves in, movements like Me Too and Time's Up and Black Lives Matter, and she even says trans lives matter. She said they're all very, very important. And she talks about how she has conversations with bosses, essentially, and leaders, and how they feel uncomfortable talking about certain things with their people and with their companies. And she said, to not have the conversation because you are uncomfortable is the definition of privilege. To not have the conversation because you are uncomfortable is the definition of privilege. Right. So she said, you can't sit back and just say, I'm not comfortable with this. It could be a shitstorm, so I'm not going to say anything. No, start the conversation and let's learn about the biases that you have. Because then she says you can listen and learn. And then please, she says, don't hold the targeted people responsible to have the conversation. They're not responsible to initiate the conversation. The ones who are targeted. So take the onus off them, and choose courage over comfort. Again, brave leaders are never silent around hard things. And so she said that's why, it's sort of incumbent on all of us to speak up and start the conversation, even if we get it wrong. It took me back to a time when I sort of did a talk about I guess I didn't even call it white privilege. I called it non-black privilege, because I was talking about Neil Wilson, who was a black woman who was killed in America, and the way that it happened, everything, it really sort of moved me. And so, I think there was a bit of there was an actual shitstorm, because Anne Hathaway, the white American actress, talked about it, and she was called a white savior, and I think someone else called me a white savior, even though I'm not white. But yeah, I think there's that sort of like what is it? There's a slight hesitation to speak on things for fear of coming across like you're being a savior or something. But in the way that I sort of talked about the Shawn King post at the start of this, I thought it was really important. I think you just gotta just say it, and if there's a shitstorm or if someone has a problem with it, they can come and comment and you can have a conversation, and that's how we learn. So if one of us gets it wrong, then that's fine, we can just learn. So gotta be brave and just speak up and just figure it out as we go along, as long as we're speaking up, right? So she said, when you don't acknowledge your vulnerability, you end up offloading your hard stuff on others. So this goes for relationships. So she said you end up dragging the other person through all kinds of stuff because you've not acknowledged your vulnerability. And the last thing that we'll end on is, she says, vulnerability is scary, but what's worse? Coming to the end of our lives and having to ask ourselves, what if I would have shown up? And that was like, makes me think, am I showing up? Am I doing enough? I could probably do more. Am I in a comfort zone? I suppose we all are to some degree. Sometimes I wonder if, this kind of grind that I'm in daily, has it become a bit of a, it's like is it Pavlov's dog? What is it? Wrong example. Just feel as if, when you're sort of in this sort of repetitive grind, you just end up, even though you're showing up and you're doing everything you can with the circumstances that you have, I'm sure there's always more that can be done. And so, yeah, I think it's important for us to sort of check ourselves and check in with ourselves, because we can end up being, we are in comfort zones to some degree. And are we showing up enough? And if we're not, is it fine? Then you're sort of generating smallness in your life, if it's fine, right? You're not playing big. And we're here for such a short time. these bodies are carrying us around. We might as well play big. So don't be concerned with the shame and the criticism. Just play big, be brave with your life, she says, and you get your ass kicked, that's fine, but this is about courage over comfort. And so I'd love to hear from you. What's courage for you? What's vulnerability for you? Do you allow yourselves to be seen and see others? And if belonging is the opposite of fitting in, you have to belong to yourself first. Are you being who you are? You're not betraying yourself for other people. And how do you practice gratitude? And are you busy chasing extraordinary moments? Are you enjoying the ordinary ones? And do you have privilege in any way? And most of all, would you ask yourself right now, what if I would have shown up? Yeah. I'm sure I can count a couple of things that I could probably have done or pushed myself to do, I'm sure. I wonder what yours are. You don't have to tell me, just great to think about. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Life at Cadbury podcast with me, Serena Hussein. You'll hear from me soon. Thank you again for listening. Please do like, subscribe and share.